It was supposed to be just another ordinary day at Dallas Love Field Airport, a place familiar to Baron Trump, son of former President Donald Trump. Baron, now a 17-year-old teenager, had been traveling alone for years. With his strikingly familiar last name, he had become used to the attention that came with it, but today he hoped to blend into the crowd and get through the day without anyone noticing him. As he sat in the busy terminal, scrolling through his phone to pass the time, he looked like any other teenager. Hoodie on, headphones in, and a quiet, unassuming presence in the midst of the hustle and bustle of airport life. It was a calm afternoon, with passengers rushing to their flights or waiting for their turn to board. Baron's flight was scheduled for 3:30 p.m., so he had arrived early to avoid any last-minute rush. Despite the constant noise of airport announcements and the sound of rolling luggage, Baron felt a sense of normalcy in the environment. He had been to this airport countless times before, and the process of getting through check-in, security, and boarding had become second nature. However, that day, something was different. As Baron sat near gate C-12, he noticed a few passengers glancing in his direction. It wasn't unusual. After all, he was used to people recognizing him or noticing the last name on his boarding pass, but it wasn't the usual friendly smiles or whispers of recognition. There was something about today's glance that felt different, almost as if there was an air of suspicion that had fallen over the terminal. Baron shook it off, telling himself it was just his imagination. Baron's attention returned to his phone as he scrolled through social media, his thoughts drifting. He was about to return to New York, where his family lived, after a short trip to Texas. Just as he was getting lost in his screen, he noticed a man approach him, an airport gate agent, mid-40s, wearing a navy blue uniform with a name tag that read Carlson. His sharp eyes and formal posture gave him the air of someone who was used to being in control. "Excuse me, young man," the agent said, standing over Baron with an expression that was both stern and curious. "Are you sure you're in the right boarding group?" Baron paused, momentarily caught off guard. He looked up from his phone and gave the agent a polite smile. "Yes, I have a first-class ticket," he said, trying to keep the conversation simple. The agent seemed to scrutinize him for a moment longer, looking at the casual clothes Baron was wearing, just a hoodie and jeans, before nodding slowly and asking, "Can I see your ticket?" Baron hesitated for a split second, then handed over his boarding pass without a second thought. The agent took it and scanned it briefly, then stared at the ticket for a few moments longer than necessary. Baron's name was listed as Baron Trump, and the agent read it aloud, almost as if he were confirming it in his mind. For a brief moment, Baron felt the weight of the name hanging in the air. It wasn't just any name. It was a name that came with a lot of baggage, a lot of expectations. Carlson's expression shifted, and Baron noticed the faintest sign of recognition in the agent's eyes. Without another word, the agent turned away, walking back toward his desk with the ticket still in hand. Baron, confused but trying to stay calm, watched him leave. Just as he was about to return to his phone, the agent returned with a supervisor in tow. The supervisor, a woman in her late 30s with dark hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, took one look at Baron and immediately focused on his ticket. "Baron Trump," she said, reading the name aloud with a slight pause. "We've had some issues with your booking. I'm going to need you to come with us for a moment." Baron's stomach dropped. He had flown countless times and had never encountered any issues at the airport. "What's going on?" he asked, trying to stay calm despite the rising tension in his chest. The supervisor didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at the agent, who nodded and said, We just need to double-check some things, sir. There seems to be an issue with your reservation." Before Barron could protest further, he was escorted away from the gate and into a small, isolated room just off the terminal. He was told to wait there while they sorted things out. Barron, now growing increasingly uneasy, sat down in one of the chairs. The room was sterile and uninviting, a far cry from the bustling terminals he was used to. He glanced at his watch. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one adding to the feeling that something was wrong. Outside the small room, passengers continued to bustle about, unaware of the drama unfolding just a few feet away. But inside, Barron felt the weight of the situation pressing on him. The whispers outside were growing louder as people noticed his absence from the gate, and Barron couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a simple mistake or misunderstanding. Several minutes later, the door opened again. This time, the supervisor returned with a man in a suit, his face grim. "Baron Trump," the man said, his voice tight. "We're still having difficulty verifying your information. We need you to stay here while we do a more thorough check. Please don't leave this room." Barron's mind raced. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath. "I've flown here 100 times. What's the issue with my ticket? It's all right there." The man didn't respond. Instead, he looked down at his clipboard, scribbling something down as he left the room. Barron was left alone again. His nerves were frayed now. He had traveled by himself before, but he had never been treated like this. He wasn't just any teenager, but he shouldn't have been treated differently because of his last name, right? He thought about the agent, about the supervisor. Something wasn't right. Unbeknownst to Barron, his mother, Melania Trump, was on her way to the airport, her instincts telling her something was off. She had been tracking Barron's flight, planning to surprise him by meeting him at the gate. However, as she checked her phone again, an urgent message popped up. "Barron is being held at the airport. There's a situation. People are posting videos." Melania's heart skipped a beat. Without a moment's hesitation, she typed back a message. "Driver, get us to the airport immediately." She didn't need to ask questions. She could feel something wasn't right. Her son was being treated unfairly, and she wouldn't stand for it. The black SUV sped through the Dallas streets, and Melania sat in the back, her thoughts racing. She had dealt with security and scrutiny countless times before, but this situation felt different. She had been a first lady, a public figure, but this was about her son, and she wouldn't allow anyone to treat him as if he were less than any other passenger. Meanwhile, at the airport, Barron continued to sit in the room, growing more frustrated by the minute. The minutes turned into what felt like hours. The door opened again, and this time the supervisor returned, looking more uncomfortable than ever. He avoided Barron's gaze as he spoke. "We've confirmed your identity," the supervisor said, his voice soft, almost apologetic. "There was an issue with the system, but it's resolved now. We're sorry for the inconvenience." Barron stood up, feeling a mix of anger and relief. "This is unbelievable," he muttered. "You've wasted so much of my time." Just as the supervisor was about to respond, the door swung open again. Melania Trump stepped into the room. Her presence immediately commanded attention, and the supervisor and the agents froze. "Mom," Barron said, his voice filled with relief. He rushed to her side. Melania looked at the agents and supervisors, her gaze calm but piercing. "What is going on here?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with authority. "My son is a paying passenger. There should have been no issue. Why is he being treated like this?" The supervisor stammered, clearly rattled. "We had trouble verifying his information, Mrs. Trump. We were just following protocol." "Protocol?" Melania interrupted. her voice cutting through the air. "My son is 17 years old and traveling alone. He has a ticket. He has a passport. What's the real reason for this delay?" The agents exchanged nervous glances, but no one dared to speak. Melania's eyes narrowed. "I want an explanation, and I want it now." The tension in the room was palpable. Baron watched as his mother, unshaken, took charge of the situation. What had started as a simple misunderstanding was quickly escalating into something much bigger. But with Melania in the room, the atmosphere had shifted. The agents, now visibly uncomfortable, began to backpedal, realizing that they could no longer ignore the situation.